the technology likely to have the greatest impact on the next few decades has arrived. And it's not social media, it's not big data, it's not robotics, it's not even AI. And you'll be surprised to learn that it's the underlying technology of digital currencies like Bitcoin. It's called the blockchain. Blockchain. Now, it's not the most sonorous word in the world, but I believe that this is now the next generation of the internet, and that it holds vast promise for every business, every society, and for all of you individually.
As Douglas North saw it, institutions are a tool to lower uncertainty so that we can connect and exchange all kinds of value in society. And I believe we are now entering a further and radical evolution of how we interact and trade. Because for the first time, we can lower uncertainty not just with political and economic institutions, like our banks, our corporations, our governments, but we can do it with technology alone. So what is the blockchain? Blockchain technology is a decentralized database that stores a registry of assets and transactions across a peer-to-peer network. It's basically a public registry of who owns what and who transacts what. The transactions are secured through cryptography, and over time, that transaction history gets locked in blocks of data that are then cryptographically linked together and secured. This creates an immutable, unforgeable record of all of the transactions across this network. This record is replicated on every computer that uses the network. It's not an app, it's not a company. I think it's closest in description to something like Wikipedia. We can see everything on Wikipedia. It's a composite view that's constantly changing and being updated. We can also track those changes over time on Wikipedia, and we can create our own wikis, because at their core, they're just a data infrastructure. On Wikipedia, it's an open platform that stores words and images and the changes to that data over time. On the blockchain, you can think of it as an open infrastructure that stores many kinds of assets. It stores the history of custodianship, ownership, and location for assets like the digital currency Bitcoin, other digital assets like a title of ownership of IP. It could be a certificate, a contract, real-world object.
So, for the first time now in human history, people everywhere can trust each other and transact peer-to-peer. And trust is established not by some big institution, but by collaboration, by cryptography, and by some clever code. And because trust is native to the technology, I call this the trust.
So uncertainty is kind of a big term in economics. But I want to go through 3 forms of it that we face in almost all of our everyday transactions, where blockchains can play a role. We face uncertainties like not knowing who we're dealing with, not having visibility into a transaction, and not having recourse if things go wrong. So I've talked about how blockchains could lower uncertainty in who we're dealing with. The second uncertainty that we often face is just not having transparency into our interactions. Say you're going to send me that smartphone by mail. I want some degree of transparency. I want to know the product I bought is the same one that arrives in the mail, and that there's some record for how it got to me. This is true not just for electronics like smartphones, but for many kinds of goods and data. Things like medicine, luxury goods, any kind of data or product that we don't want tampered with. So we can create that using blockchains. We can create a decentralized database that has the same efficiency of a monopoly without actually creating that central authority. So all of these vendors, all sorts of companies, can interact using the same database without trusting one another. It means for consumers, we can have a lot more transparency. As a real-world object travels along, we can see its digital certificate or token move on the blockchain, adding value as it goes. Long distances and complex trades, like in a supply chain. The last uncertainty that we often face is one of the most open-ended, and it's reneging. What if you don't send me the smartphone? Can I get my money back? Blockchains allow us to write code, binding contracts between individuals, and then guarantee that those contracts will bear out without a third-party enforcer. Technology is the fact that the very thing that makes it work, the very thing that keeps the blockchain secure and verified, is our mutual distrust.
Statistically, all of us in this room would have a friend or a loved one who has suffered from a life-threatening disease. In such a situation, we all want to get the best possible treatment for that person. Some years ago, I got a phone call late in the night by my best friend, mentor, and boss in that time. And usually, whenever he would call me, I would be super excited. But that call was different. He called me to inform that he was diagnosed with cancer. Subsequently, many days were spent in a hospital close to a town close to Frankfurt, sitting at his bedside, working, as I saw him fight the grueling rounds of chemo. And as his family looked hopeless and helpless, staring at the ceiling, I researched and tried to find answers to 3 questions. What are the alternative therapies? Where can he get access to these therapies in Europe? Who are the key opinion leaders whom we can get a second opinion for his specific kind of disease? I'm sure all of you in such a situation would have similar questions in your minds. And these are profound questions, not just for people who are not well-versed with medical knowledge or medicine, but also for practitioners. Because healthcare is data-rich. Peter Denson, in one of the studies, claims that at the present rate, medical knowledge would double itself every 73 days in the year 2020. That means the data at the beginning of the year 2020 would be more than 32 times at the end of that year. This data is deep, dense, and diverse, and there is a continuous inflow in the published universe from thousands of clinical trials, patents, publications, what regulatory bodies publish, what patients talk about in patient forums, and the increasing degree of specificity and innovation in life science is making this data more deep and more diverse. Even a bigger explosion is happening in the data silos of the unpublished universe, data that sits in the lab journals and in the servers of research institutions. So mountains of data, published and unpublished, and sick people, our loved ones, waiting for better therapies only if this data could be sifted through accurately and quickly. How do we solve this problem? Some companies try the manual annotation approach. They hire thousands of analysts and try to curate this data manually, which is, of course, labor-intensive, and it can never be real-time. It also leads to data monopolies, which leads to information arbitrage, meaning players with deeper pockets, well-funded biotechs, big pharmas, big treatment centers can afford these solutions, this data. But smaller players, average players, normal physicians, patients, smaller biotechs cannot afford this data. My team and I see artificial intelligence and blockchain as the possible solution to this problem. AI has a general rule. The more relevant data you push in, the more relevant results it provides. And that brings me to my second problem. A lot of this data is trapped in the data silos of the unpublished universe of science. In science, nobody wants to talk about failures. All journals want to bask in the glory of successful experiments. No physician, no researcher wants to share his failures. But what is a failure for one researcher could be extremely valuable for somebody else, because he should not repeat the same failure. Nobody can view what is the scientific progress made in a specific domain. And of course, why should scientists just share their experimental data of failures or of successes? There are genuine concerns related to intellectual property. There are also genuine concerns related to data privacy. My team and I see blockchain as the best solution to address these concerns. Blockchain technology provides a tamper-proof timestamp to your intellectual property. So when you publish about your experiment, the universe knows it's broadcasted that this experiment belongs to you. Also, blockchain provides an immutable register for transactions. So if you share your data with anybody, under specific circumstances, even this data transfer and the conditions thereof are immutably registered in blockchain. AI and blockchain are only valuable if they solve real-world use cases. My friend, whom I referred to in the beginning of my talk, is, thanks to God, hale and hearty and is doing extremely well. Back then, I could just find a few references for him, but it doesn't have to be that way. Artificial intelligence and blockchain can usher us into a paradigm, into an era where we could render all data, published or unpublished, searchable and shareable. And that era is not coming in the future. That era is now.